Welcome to the Soar Podcast, the place for creative entrepreneurs with limitless dreams and unconventional stories who want to build healthier, happier, more profitable self-employed businesses. I'm your host, Ray Hyde Cornell. Get ready to soar. Welcome to the Soar Podcast. On today's episode, we have Dawn Robles. Dawn, tell our listeners what it is that you do.
Hi, Ray. Thank you for having me. I'm excited for this conversation. I am the founder and owner of Simple Productivity, and I help small business owners and solopreneurs, there they go, simplify systems and processes to become more productive and get more things done.
Perfect. And so this idea of productivity, I think this is really important for us to break down what does that actually mean? Because when we see ads on Facebook or Instagram or Google or whatever, and we say, oh yeah, of course I need to be more productive. I need to, in our brains, that tends to mean I need to do more output. I need to produce more. I need to be more productive. And for a lot of us, that ends up meaning, oh, I have to work harder. I have to work longer hours. I have to grind. But that's really not the point of what we do here at Chiron. And it's not the point of what I believe in, which is that our businesses are meant to support the lives that we want, not the other way around. We don't live to work. We work so that we can live the lives that we want. So tell me about your take on productivity and what a healthy mindset around productivity actually looks like.
Yes, I love this question. I feel that the term productivity is very triggering for some people because it implies all those things that you just said, grinding, thinking that we need to control everything all the time, and that kind of a hustle mindset, I would call it. And the way that I define it is much broader than that. And I say that it's about getting things done and taking care of your daily responsibilities in a way that feels satisfying to you, so that you feel the way that you feel, that you want to feel most of the time. And I'm talking about that really broadly in terms of both personal outside of work time and work time, whether you're an employee or running a business. And I have a strong bias that productive people are happy people, because there's some kind of deep satisfaction that comes from, I guess it's kind of a discipline that comes from following through on things that maybe sometimes aren't necessarily easy, like the path of least resistance and instant gratification, that get us to having the life that we want to live. And so optimized productivity is when you have your time and your energy and your attention all aligned with each other. And so we can talk more about that later, but those are the broad ways that I think about productivity.
And I think you're right. Like everyone that I've ever worked with on the Cornell side or the Chiron side, we all kind of bond over this mental satisfaction, this like brain pleasure that we get out of checking something off of a list or crossing off something on our to-dos. And maybe that's one of the reasons why my team and I really enjoy using Asana as our project management tool, because it gives you that little check. And then of course they shoot the unicorn across the screen and that just makes everything better. But we all want that feeling of, I accomplished something, but that doesn't always necessarily mean that we have to be grinding and working hard. I listened to an interview with an author once. I want to say it was Elizabeth Gilbert, but I don't know if that was correct. She said that she knocked out 200 items on her big to-do list in 1 year. And the interviewer said, well, how did you do that? She goes, well, I just looked at them and saw that they weren't important to me anymore. So I just took them off the list. I didn't do them. I just took them off the list. But that made her feel just as good. It's kind of like this, we want to feel like we're making progress as opposed to feeling like we are output machines. So
I'd like to that.
Yeah.
Can I interrupt you? I'm sorry, but I wanted to, because this is important. I recently learned about scientific studies that have been done around goal setting and achievement. What she was saying was that reaching our goals actually only gives us a very brief hit of dopamine. But and so that's that good feeling of I reached my goal, but actually what keeps us going is those checking things off and moving forward. And I don't mean literally checking things off the list, but making progress towards the goal and the intention. And that's super important, because that's where systems come in. So when you set up systems that help automate the process of moving towards your goals, you get all kinds of productivity and all kinds of success along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to get into this model that you mentioned with time, energy, and attention. But before we get into that, how did you get into this line of work? Because most people, especially kids, we don't, wake up one day and go, Mommy, Daddy, I want to be a productivity expert. I want to be a systems specialist. What brought you to this point in your career?
Yes. Oh, it's so fun. Yeah. So I've done work everywhere, starting from running an offset press and managing a print shop way back, to being in environmental education, working on literacy and youth development programs. And then most recently, but for the last almost 30 years, I've worked as an evaluator in the context of informal learning environments. So working in science museums and after school programs and that sort of thing. And what I learned through all of, like, the common thread through all of that was organizing and managing projects. And I sort of got this reputation for being a dog on a bone who can just go across the finish line and get things done. And so I just had this it was like a serendipitous opportunity that came to me to help an artist and a writer organize a couple of studios that he wanted to set up for those purposes. And it clicked in that there's this whole field called professional organizing. And so I did that. So I started a company called Dawn to Desk Organizing, which was residential, hands-on. And that was in 2018. But when COVID hit, I had been doing it long enough to go, wait a second. The physical clutter that's going on in people's homes is actually a symptom of lack of systems and habits that don't support the kind of lifestyle that they want to have.
Yeah.
And so that's more interesting to me. And so then I pivoted and I opened Simple Productivity. And so I was excited and ready because I feel really excited about the topic. I'm really passionate about doing it for myself. And I feel like I just have a natural competence and could nerd out for days with spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff. So it just felt like a really good fit to me. And that's how I ended up here.
Yeah. It's like, I forget how many years ago it was, but when Marie Kondo and the Does It Spark Joy thing were really popular, that was great and all, but that was addressing the superficial problem of the clutter. It wasn't addressing the deeper layer of, okay, what's causing the clutter? Why are you constantly having to clean out your closets every spring? It wasn't getting to the root of the systems and the habits that are perpetuating this burden of things around us. So I love that you're taking it to that next layer.
Yeah, I agree.
So tell me about, there's so many things I want to ask you about, but let's start with the one that we mentioned first, this 3-pillar model, and I'm calling it that, maybe you have a different term for it, of time, energy, and attention. How did you come up with this, and what does this mean for people in practice?
Yes. Well, I didn't come up with it. It's a fairly common, I would call it a principle within the productivity domain. And I've seen it in many different contexts, or different combinations of that: time, energy, and money, time, energy, and passion, different kinds of things. But I think those three, that if you only have one of the three, it's kind of like the whole 3-legged stool metaphor. So you might have a lot of energy and a lot of attention to start a new business, but if you have too many other commitments, meaning your time is tied up, it limits you with those other two things. Or say you have time and attention for parenting, but you're exhausted all the time. And so you don't have the energy to be patient and to be proactive. So anytime you pull out a piece, then it just is a little bit crookedy, like a 3-legged stool. It feels like the right metaphor. And so say in business, if you are getting ready to get your tax stuff together for your CPA, and you know the timeline and you know what they need, but every time you start to do it, you don't have a system. And so you forget where you left off. And so you have this friction point that's sticky and you have to start over, or you just, your receipts are scattered everywhere. It's a classic problem. So there's just lots and lots of examples of that.
And I think another one that I see, particularly in early stage entrepreneurs and freelancers who have more recently left the traditional employment world, and they're kind of like getting their feet wet and trying to figure out what they do or what they want to do. They have time and they have energy, but their attention is scattered all over the place. So they might feel like, oh yeah, I have the attention and I can focus on something, but then they have that, but it's diffused over too many different passion projects or business ideas that they might want to start. And so I think I can see this model in practice. How do people figure out which thing they're lacking, and how do they go about getting that missing piece back into the equation?
Well, I feel like there's a lot of good productivity. I'm kind of hesitant to use the word tool, but it's really practices where, because really the barrier to productivity is just feeling stuck in some way or another. You're stuck. So there's the Eisenhower matrix, and there's this 3 pillars of productivity where anytime you feel like I'm procrastinating, I'm paralyzed, I'm overwhelmed, I don't know what to do, you can pull back. And here's where the reflection piece comes in. Sit down with your piece of paper and start writing. And then you can use that framework of like, oh, do I not have enough time? Or am I exhausted? Do I have not enough energy? Or is like you said, my attention is scattered. My time is fragmented, which is both a time and an attention kind of problem, which is super, super common, especially if you have kids and you're trying to run a business, which I do. And it's just a way to stop and think, because I think most of the time we kind of know what we need to do. Like we just need to stop and take the time and just be honest and just reflect and kind of go deep and trust yourself and say, hey, I have too much to do. Can I give you a perfect example of this?
Yeah.
This weekend, I sat down because I was feeling those things, and I did what some people call a brain dump, or David Allen calls it mind sweep, where you get everything off your mind, because our minds are not for holding on to ideas, they're for having ideas, right? That's the classic David Allen thing. And I love him for that, because that's another place where we get stuck, is all that stuff is stuck in our head. So we get it out into our trusted system, and then we can focus on the one thing. And so I did that, and I started putting everything down into kind of the broad areas of responsibility that I have. So my finances, my home, my business development, those kind of chunks. And then I started plugging things into my calendar. Like, here's what my day, here's how I want to spend my day. I want to talk about that in a minute. And I saw very quickly that it was just too much. Like, there is just no way. But by putting it down like that, I was able to go, okay, I literally, it's kind of like a physics problem. Like, you can't force too much stuff into this box, right? And I think this is so common. And so then I had to prioritize it. Just forced me, but it was good. It was a relief, because then it gave me a break and sort of like, I don't know, some self-compassion to be able to just say, here's what really is the most important thing. And some of that included taking a rest, actually, because I was exhausted, and that was part of my overwhelm. And because of that, the next day I was able to go boom, 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 and finish off the other things because I rested.
That's such a smart exercise.
Like a puzzle.
Yeah. And we so often just think, when we're holding it all in our heads, we just tend to think, oh, I just need to be more productive. I just need to be focused. I just need to sit down and do it. I can manage it all. I can be strong. I can be driven. I'm ambitious. I have dreams. I need to do it all. I want to take on all the responsibility. I'm not going to ask for anybody's help. But then when you put it all on paper like that, and you try to actually apply it to a time scale, like a calendar, you actually objectively see there is just way too much and there are not enough hours in the day. And it's not enough. It's not a matter of you not being strong enough or determined enough or productive enough. It's literally a matter of you have too much on your plate.
That's right. Yeah. And then, I mean, there's just all kinds of ways that I work with people around. Okay, so now that we know that, let's bucket things out. So, for example, you know, sometimes people think that they have to have this thing called balance, work-life balance.
The myth, the great myth.
Well, yeah. And what I always talk about with people is like, okay, yeah, of course we all want that in an ideal world, but there's times when we do want to really push and build on momentum. Like, you know how in the beginning of books and the acknowledgments, they always say, oh, thank you to my, partner who like held me together through all of this. Like everybody stands aside. We're opening a business. We're doing a launch. We got to just hustle. And it's okay because there's the someday maybe list. Like it's the seasons, right? Of getting things done and producing. And so it's kind of like intentional imbalance. Like I'm choosing to be out of balance right now, but it's on purpose. And I know that I'm doing it versus just doing it by default because we're not organized with our time and our attention.
Yeah.
Right.
And I love that you use the word seasons because I think this is a really important concept for people to understand, which is that you cannot be expected to be consistent across the board all the time. Perfect balance between work and life. That is not going to happen. It doesn't even happen in nature. In nature, there's spring and there's fall when things are very abundant and growing like crazy. And that's the highly productive time. And then in the summer, things slow down because it's too hot. And in the winter, things slow down because it's too cool. The cycle of nature is to go hard and then rest, and then go hard and then rest. That's okay for us to adopt that model too. I'm not sure where in our history as a culture we got it in our heads that we have to have this constant perfect balance of work, life, perfectly in harmony.
Well, yeah. And even that dichotomy of work and life. It's like, I love my work.
Yeah.
To me, my work is my life. And it's really more about, actually wanted to make sure to say this out loud. One of the things that I feel really good about bringing to my clients is the differentiation between areas of responsibility or domains of life and projects. Because a lot of lists that I see of people's to-do lists are really apples and oranges. So for example, health is an area of life. It's something that never ends. We're always paying attention to it or not in some way or another. It's affecting our lives. It's a consequence. We have consequences no matter what we do in terms of our actions. But running a marathon is a project. So maintaining your day-to-day habits around, say, your diet, your nutrition, that's an ongoing process. And that's a really good idea to automate and build habits. I do my shopping on Sundays, whatever your prep, to make that easier so it doesn't take up, so you don't have to make decisions all the time about it, which drains your willpower, right? And then the project is, okay, I really want to run a marathon. So I'm going to get on a, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm going to run with the group and I'm going to have this specialized training or whatever, however people do that. I've never done it, but so that distinction is super helpful for people designing their time. And also that thing that we call work-life balance. There's areas of responsibility, and sometimes we might have to pop in and pay a bill in the middle of a workday. That's life.
Yeah.
So, it's more, I love that now things are more integrated. I think partly because of COVID, but we've been moving in that direction for a long time. And I think that's positive as long as we learn how to manage our time.
Yes, I agree. And I want to ask you, we're going to take a super short commercial break. And then when we come back, I want to ask you about this concept of managing your time, how to plan your day, and the systems that people can actually put into place now to start feeling more productive without feeling more hustle. So we will be right back.
That's good.
Hey, Ray here. Ever wish this whole creative self-employment thing was easier? Like, wouldn't it be nice if there was, I don't know, a step-by-step guide for building a successful freelance business? You know where I'm going with this, right? That guide does exist. Back in the day when I first started out hustling and side gigging, I wish I had a roadmap to fast track my way to self-employed success. So I made one for you. No matter where you are in business, I guarantee you this guide can help you get to the next stage faster, and the next, and the next. Whether you're still deciding if ditching the W-2 is right for you, or if you're struggling with your pricing, business formation, client acquisition, sales, or even health insurance, this guide has everything you need. Get your free copy of the complete guide to building a successful freelance business at chironconsulting.us/guide. We are back with Dawn Robles. So Dawn, we're talking about how to start taking all of these concepts around systems and productivity and respecting the fact that there isn't always a separation between work and life, and that's okay. And so I want to make sure that we give people listening some action items that they can do, some steps that they can try, some practices they can put in place. And we've mentioned a few things that really are near and dear to my heart. Like we've talked about energy and planning things on a calendar. And we do something at Chiron called the Energy Aligned Success Schedule, where I actually have our workshop attendees track their energy for 3 days before coming to the workshop. And then we plot out where they should actually put things that they're responsible for on their calendar, depending on their unique energy pattern. And it sounds like you do something similar with paying attention to people's energy, paying attention to their attention, and helping them figure out how that matches up with their time. So how do you help people manage their calendars and create systems to feel more productive without draining their battery even more?
Okay, yeah. Such a multi-layered question.
Yes, sorry about that. This is a complex
No,
one.
it's okay. It's very important to get down to what can I actually do. I want one big idea that I keep coming back to over and over again is this kind of linking of behaviors. And so action that you take builds habits over time, right? Then as your habits get more ingrained, it builds automaticity, which means that you don't have to think about it anymore. Like thinking about brushing your teeth is an easy example, right? Then that leads to identity. So I'm a person who brushes my teeth. It doesn't matter how late I get home, whatever, traveling, I brush my teeth. So I'm going to put this in the context of getting things done. So if I want to end up as I'm a person who's productive, I'm going to work backwards. Okay. So every day I do one big thing that is working towards my goal, my intention. So let's say at the end of the day, I want to feel like I've been productive. Mm-hmm. So in the morning, when my energy is most available to me, I'm going to say morning because that's very common for people. Mm-hmm. I'm going to spend a half an hour writing because content is important to the business that I do. I'm going to put that in my calendar from 9:30 to 10 because that's a time that's common when things are quiet, my kids are already at school. I'm just making this up, okay? Mm-hmm. Then I put that in my calendar. So I honor my calendar because most people make appointments. They show up to their dentist, they show up to pick up their kids. And so that the calendar is, I think, an undervalued productivity framework. Yeah. It's like in the end, that's kind of what drives our days, right? So from 9:30 to 10, I do the action. I start getting in the habit of it. So at 9 o'clock, it's triggered by an alarm or it's triggered by just a temporal trigger, right? I sit down, I do my writing. Pretty soon it becomes automatic. Pretty soon I'm a person who writes every day. Like that's a profound identity shift from somebody who's like, when am I ever going to get the time to write? I never have time because I'm answering emails, because I'm putting clothes in the laundry, because I'm going down a rabbit hole of some sales funnel thingy online. Yeah. Right. All the things that we think we should be doing. And so this is a really common productivity, another framework, which is the 3 big rocks. I think you've probably heard, or the 3 rocks syndrome. So put your big rock in first, into a glass that takes up the most room because that's the highest priority. So it's a long answer to your question of prioritizing the things that are really the profit-making steps that we need to take. And also at the end of the day, like, wow, I actually did my writing. And then after that, then doing the other pieces that you need to do, whether it's administrative work or networking, that sort of thing.
Well, and my next question would be, how do people figure out what that thing is that they need to do that will help them move towards their goal and when to do it? But you've already kind of touched on that before, which is this planning plus reflection piece. So tell me about, I think we all kind of get excited about planning, or maybe that's just me because I'm totally type A, but we get excited about planning and putting things on paper and making these grand plans and creating these big visions. But you have this additional piece of reflection. Tell me about that and why that's really important in this process.
Yes. I think people get excited about planning because it feels so good to get things out of our heads.
Yeah.
And it gives us a little bit of a sense of relief from the chaos.
Mm-hmm.
But if we don't go back and look at it again and then turn it into an action of some kind or another, that's the missing piece. And so, and I say this out of my own very strong personal experience of this too. You know, when I actually put it on my calendar, then it feels more doable, and it feels like I'm being proactive in that sense of like, I am actually going to accomplish something. And then as far as how you decide what that piece is, it could come from just paying attention to where you are in the business, where you are in terms of development, like I need more clients, and so then that means that you put your effort into either refining your niche. Maybe you don't have enough people come in because you're not clear on who your niche is, or being really clear on what your offer is, or and maybe you might need a little bit of business consulting with that, getting into a group or some kind of, just reading, doing more research a little bit on that. Doing more research is a little tricky because that's a real rabbit hole we can get stuck in and never do anything, right?
Right.
And then also a lot of times I think if we sit with ourselves, we really actually do know what we need to do.
Yeah.
And that runs into a whole other area that I work with people on, which is, what is my fear? Why am I procrastinating? Why am I stuck? Like I often unpack that with people and find that it's what they thought they were stuck on is not what turns out was the real problem.
Yeah. So can we go a little deeper on that? Because I think that's so common for us to feel stuck. Like, how do you help someone go from, I think I'm stuck on this, like, let's say, I'm going to use someone I know as an example. So maybe if she's listening to this will be a little treat for her, but she's stuck in deciding what kind of freelance writing she wants to do. She's a fantastic writer. She's tried all sorts of things and she feels stuck in really making a decision. That seems like the surface level thing. How would you take her a layer deeper to help her figure out which direction she actually needs to go to get unstuck?
Well, with just that little bit of context, I guess the first thing I would do is to get her to say all the things that she already knows for sure that she doesn't want to do, and like cross those off the list, because that creates that sort of tornado feeling. And say she narrows it down to 3 areas. Then I would say, okay, let's take one of those and play it out. Like 5 years, or no, that's even easier. 1 year from now, how do you want to be feeling? What's your vision of how your day is going to look like? And if you're a freelance writer, I assume that means you're doing research. Who are the kind of people you want to be talking to? Who are the people who really get you excited? And maybe that's the way to pursue. Like, and maybe the other 2 are like, yeah, I love the idea of that, but when it comes to doing the research involved, that feels a little sticky because it reminds me too much of my father, or like, you can really
Yeah.
unpack stuff pretty
Yeah.
quickly if you just give it some time and ask a lot and be curious about it. I would say curiosity. It's one of my huge joys in life, is being curious and talking to people who are curious,
And I
because
think
it kind
that's,
of takes the ego out,
yes, absolutely. Because you're focused on learning, not being right. And I think the same thing with these decisions where we get stuck. We're so focused on making the right choice or choosing the right path or picking the right strategy and not wasting time, that we're looking at all of these options and we're like, man, there's just so much to choose from. But I love what you said about, okay, well, first, write down a list of all the things that you don't want and the things that would fall into that category. So you're decluttering the decision tree. You're narrowing it from 20 branches down to 3 branches. I think that's so smart, as opposed to having people weigh the pros and cons of each option against each other.
Well, and here's another example of somebody I'm working with right now who, she has a business, and then she also has this incredible life where her and her family own a farm, and it's a big farm. Like, they've got a bunch of cattle and they plant crops and
Wow.
stuff. And they have this house, which is it's like a vacation home that they're maintaining and have things to do. So she has a lot on her plate. And she was she was feeling stuck around the marketing for her business.
Mm.
And just like she said, every time I sit down to do it, I don't really get very far because I feel a little distracted and low energy. And what we found by digging in was that she wasn't getting enough time. It wasn't like she wanted to go eat bonbons and watch Netflix. She's very ambitious and she's very organized, but she wanted to have time to work on the satisfying projects, like the painting project, organizing her garage project, they're productivity related, but those are things that give her that feeling of satisfaction, of hands-on. I get things done. I cross them off my list. And so we talked about, okay, let's figure out a way to just plunk in a few days where you can do those things so you get that satisfaction.
Yeah.
And there's where that kind of personal and work-life balance come in, because then you get rejuvenated and you feel that kind of like, I'm happy just kind of being in my life. And then I'm like, okay, I can go write those ads now. I can go do that marketing stuff now. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the balance that you're talking about, the want tos versus the need tos. I want to do this, and those things need to come first before doing the need tos. The need tos will get done once you've satisfied yourself with the want tos.
I think so. Yeah.
There's one more question I wanted to ask you. And when you were talking about putting things on your calendar and choosing the right slot in your day to do that, I heard a friend of mine's voice in my head going, well, I don't like to plan anything, and I don't like having a rigid structure, and I just like to go with the flow. How do you help those people who they maybe have a history of being in too much structure, because maybe they were in a W-2 job where their time was really controlled, or maybe that's how they grew up in a very controlling environment, or whatever the case may be. Now they have this craving for relaxedness around their schedule and going with the flow. How do you help those people with their productivity?
I love this question so much. Okay, so I'm going to say the nice answer first.
Okay.
Okay. So, I feel like we can have both. I really do. Like, I feel like, well, that I would say to her, okay, so what are the things that, like, again, coming back to this visualization piece, what do you want your life to look like a year from now? And like really sit with it and visualize it as if it's happening. That whole idea how our body can actually, the neurons do the thing that you're thinking of if you really get into it and visualize. I love that. And then working backwards from there, can you get there without any structure? And if you can, that's amazing. Like, go for it. I feel like go for it. Seriously, like that would be my answer. And then I would say, working backwards from that, I would say, well, maybe there's just a few days it might be a little bit better to have a little bit more structure. Or maybe, like for me, I really need to have a structured food plan because I've got a lot of food issues. So if my food is structured, it makes everything else easier for me to be a little bit more go with the flow. That's just one small example. And then also, sometimes I'm really honest with people. Like this has come up with a couple of clients that I've actually had to stop working with because I finally had to say, well, how is that working for you? You know, like it wasn't working for her to not be structured, but she didn't want to structure. And so she was just miserable.
Yeah.
And so I had to stop because I had to wait, and I'm hoping that she'll find her way somehow, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there are times in our lives when we're not ready for a solution, where we still need to kind of be in the feeling of, it's like the stages of change. There's pre-contemplation, and then there's contemplation. And maybe in that case with the client that you're talking about, maybe she was just in that pre-contemplation or contemplation stage where she's not ready to take action, but she's thinking about it and she jumped to the action a little too early. Sometimes we need to sit in the discomfort of the current situation, the current way of doing things, a little bit longer so that we can learn more about why that's not working for us and what we actually want our lives to change into.
Yes, I love that. And that's a really important part of this in terms of longevity and sustainability of a new system is that change happens at the speed of safety. If we don't feel safe, we can't sustain it. And I think that was her situation. She didn't feel safe giving up the control that the system that she had that wasn't working for her. She didn't feel safe to surrender to a new way of doing things yet because she felt like she was going to lose every bit of control that she had. I think that's exactly what was going on for her.
And on the note of those wise words, where can people check you out if people want to learn more about you, learn from you, or work with you?
Yes, thank you. So the best place is just going on my website, which is simpleproductivity.com, all one word. And I have a contact me form where you can fill out a request to do a discovery call. And I think that's the best way to start. And also I'm going to give you my email address, which is dawn.simpleproductivity@gmail.com.
Perfect. And we will put all of those links in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here, Dawn. This was great.
Thank you, Ray. I really had a great time. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Hey, Ray here again. Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, please subscribe and rate us in your favorite podcasting platform. Want to be a guest on the show or know someone who has an amazing story of entrepreneurship? Apply on our website at chironconsulting.us/podcast.